Hi, I'm Rich from Dubai92 and today I'm going to show you, using Spinny's ingredients, how to make a basic fruit tart. Fruit tart with a little difference though, so we're going to kick it off by making sweet crust pastry. For this recipe what you need is 150 grams of plain flour, 50 grams of icing sugar, 75 grams of butter and 1 egg. So you can use a bowl and do this by hand, or you can use a KitchenAid like myself and it happens a lot quicker. So we're going to put into a bowl 150 grams of white flour. To that we're going to add 75 grams of butter. And then if you're using a bowl, you would just be using your fingertips and turn this into fine breadcrumbs. Or I'm going to use this machine and I'm just going to put it for about 2 or 3 minutes. When it looks like fine breadcrumbs, we're just going to add 50 grams of icing sugar. I prefer to use icing sugar to caster sugar because you don't get that grainy texture in the pastry. So we're just going to add that through. And we're going to allow that just to mix in with the fine breadcrumbs. Now, most pastries require water. We're just going to use 1 egg, and that's going to bind our pastry together. And the egg yolk's also going to add it richness to the butter and the sugar. Slow down the mixer and just bring that into combine together. Once the pastries come together, stop it. You don't want to overwork it, otherwise you'll make the gluten stretch and then you won't get a crisp buttery biscuit base. So we're going to remove this from the mixer. Again, it's a wet pastry but not too wet, but it's not too dry. You don't want it too dry, you don't want it too wet. We're going to take that out and we're going to wrap it in cling film and we're going to put it in the fridge to chill for 30 minutes. Put it into the fridge will allow the butter to stiffen, and so it'll give you a firmer paste when we're rolling it. While we're waiting for the pastry to firm up, we're going to make the filling to my tart. Now I love this tart because it uses a very small amount of fruit, whether it's fresh fruit, a jam or even poached fruit. It's just a simple way to cook. So today we're going to make it with strawberry jam. You could make this tart with poached pears, you could make it with frozen cherries, anything you have in the house, in the freezer, in the stock cupboards. So we're going to make the filling now, okay? So we're going to make an almond cream. So for this we're going to use 115 grams of ground almonds. Just going to add that to the mixer. A very simple ingredient because we're going to add to this 115 grams of caster sugar, fine sugar, and we're also going to add 115 grams of butter. Like the pastry, we're just going to work this down to resemble fine breadcrumbs, and that will take about 3 minutes. Okay, so once the mixtures come together, you'll notice it's kind of like a creamier breadcrumb consistency. To that we're going to add a teaspoon of vanilla essence. If you don't have vanilla essence, you can use almond essence or a syrup you have in the house. It just gives extra flavour. And we're also going to add 3 whole eggs. Again, this is called almond cream and it's going to be the filling to our fruit tart. Now if we blend this right now, it's going to curdle because the almonds and the butter and the eggs won't mix. So we're just going to add a tablespoon of plain flour. Maybe a tiny bit more because the eggs are big, and that's going to actually hold the mixture together. So just beat that up. Once it's combined, it should look like a sponge mixture. That's how we want it. So we're going to take it off the speed. And we're going to let that rest until we need it. Once the pastry is rested for half an hour, we're going to turn it out onto a piece of cling film. I'll explain why in just a minute, but first we're going to talk about how we're going to bake the flan, the tart. We're going to use a ring. You could just use a normal pie case or even a plate if you wanted to. I'm just putting it onto some silicone onto a baking tray. So the reason that I've got it onto a piece of cling film is because I don't want to add any more flour when I roll out a sweet crust pastry, just because I don't want it to get too glutinous and dry as I incorporate more flour. You could do this between 2 sheets of greaseproof paper or baking paper. I like cling film because I can actually see where it's going and it's the transparency. So on top of the pastry, we're just going to add another layer of cling film. And cling film also gives you a little bit more durability when you're lifting the pastry up. So using a rolling pin, we're just going to roll out the pastry to an even layer, rolling one way and then rolling the next way, trying to keep it in that square. Now this pastry I've cut in half. There's enough pastry in the recipe to make 2 tins, 2 small flans, which I'm going to make, or to make 1 large one. Now this pastry is extremely forgiving, and I'll explain what that means in a minute when we are actually learning the pastry. Okay, so once we got to the desired thickness, we remove the top layer of cling film, and you are left with the pastry rolled out finely. This works with all pastries, and I prefer using it because then you don't get extra flour in it. It doesn't change the consistency, and you always get exactly the same pie every time you make it. Now the pastry is cold, so you want to work quickly. Hold in the tin flat, lift the pastry up with your hand, and we're just going to drop it into the center. Now having the cling film on gives us an extra ability to actually pick the pastry up, fold it, and actually get it right into the corners. Now you don't need to grease the tin because there's a lot of butter in the pastry as it is, so that's going to self-grease itself. And what we want to do is we just want to just bring it over the lip. Now if you get any holes in it, don't worry. Like I said, this pastry is very forgiving. You can take off a little bit extra and you can just patch it as you go. But using the cling film, you probably won't need to. Push it into all the gaps. And when you're happy with that, we're just going to remove the top piece of cling film. Now if it rips, don't worry, we can just push it back again because it's got a high fat content. So like I said, it's extremely forgiving. When the cling film's been removed, we're just going to take the rolling pin and we're just going to give it a roll over the top of the tin, and that's going to give us a nice sharp clean edge. Now at this point I would probably put the pastry back into the fridge for about 15 minutes. However, I want to show you how to make the tart, so we're going to use strawberry jam for mine. Now at this stage you could put some frozen cherries at the bottom of this, you could put some poached pears, tinned apple, anything that you have which is fruit can be used at this point. So I'm going to use a few tablespoons of jam. Again, you could use cherry jam. I wouldn't use any citrus fruits because it wouldn't go with the almonds, but something sweet will. And this is almost like a Bakewell tart. So we're just going to spread the jam out onto the bottom. When we have the jam spread, or the tinned fruit, or your poached pears, we're then going to bring back the almond cream, and we're just going to pour it into the flan base. And then using a spatula, we're just going to pour that out to the edges. Not go over the pastry, just keep it in. This is why I love this flan dish, because it's very easy to remove afterwards. And again, one of my favourite fruit tarts to make because it's so simple. And you could make this in small tartlets, or you can make a big pie. Okay, before we bake this, we're just going to garnish this with some sliced almonds, and we're just going to sprinkle them on top. If you have used poached pears or that, you can let the fruit actually stick through the almond cream, and like a sponge it will grow around it and will look absolutely gorgeous. We're going to bake this in a preheated oven at 180 degrees centigrade, 350 degrees Fahrenheit, gas mark 4.5 for about 25 minutes. After 25 minutes, we're going to remove the flan from the oven. I'm going to check it's cooked. It may need a tiny bit longer or less. So we're just going to use a skewer. We're just going to go in the center at an angle and then up again, and it comes out clean, so we know it's cooked. We're going to leave it there to rest for about 15 minutes, let it cool, and then we're going to serve it up. Now that it's cool enough, we're just going to remove the ring once it's on the serving dish, and there you have your strawberry fruit tart.